South Africa is ranked number 7 out of 193 countries in the latest Global Crime Index. According to the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, South Africa has the 3rd highest criminality score in Africa. This is after the DRC and Nigeria. Crimes such as sex trafficking, child labour, domestic servitude, including organ smuggling, have contributed to the latest ranking. Let's speak now to Professor Philip Frankel, who is the author of Human Trafficking in South Africa. Joins us now via the virtual platform. Professor, good morning to you and thank you for your time. Just how bad is organised crime in South Africa?
Since the end of the apartheid regime, organised crime has developed a very firm foothold in South Africa itself. Although there are cases which are worse, there are certain facets of South African society which assist organised crime and which also assist, for that matter, human trafficking, which is my area of expertise. For example, we have one of the most unequal societies in the world, although that doesn't necessarily mean that we have crime as a result of that. But not only that, we also have huge borders which are difficult to penetrate, very easy to penetrate. They're poorly patrolled. There's very high levels of police complicity and corruption with organised crime and international cartels. And we also have a banking system, a highly sophisticated banking system in South Africa, which makes it, relatively speaking, to launder the illicit profits which come from organised crime.
Yeah. Professor, just reading that introduction and the last element there about the kinds of crimes that are now springing up, organ smuggling is part of it. And I imagine this is very sophisticated. Why is it that organised crime in South Africa has gotten progressively worse?
I think the thing about organised crime is it's multi-purpose in the sense that if criminals find it impossible to engage in one form of crime, they move on to something else. And when you talk about organ smuggling, you're talking about something which is prolific in South Africa and Southern Africa, and is also one of the most lucrative crimes in the whole human trafficking spectrum. So that's the one side. The other side, again, is the lack of law enforcement. We have some excellent laws in South Africa which are meant to combat crime, but the problem is that they are very poorly implemented by the police, who, for example, in areas like human trafficking, have very little training indeed. Again, there's the issue of corruption, and it means that the police are simply not doing their job. And it is a big job to do. I mean, it's a circular kind of situation. The more organised crime you have, the more crime there is to prosecute, and the more you attempt to prosecute unsuccessfully, the more organised crime you have.
So let's talk about human trafficking, and that's your area of expertise.
That's my area.
Yeah. Now, surely, with the systems that are being put in place, for example, recently I interviewed the commissioner of the Border Management Authority, and the promise there is that things are going to get tougher for criminals. Perhaps let me ask the question differently. Why is it? Why is it that this has been so easy to do for criminals? What is it about the system? If it's not the system, then surely, Professor, it's got to do with people who are easily amenable to bribes.
Yeah, look, you've got to appreciate that South Africa is the center of an entire region where there is ongoing movement of people across borders. And a very high proportion of that movement is driven by the simple requirement for the necessities of life. And it's also driven by the fact that many of these people are, in fact, undocumented. So we've got this huge circulation of crime, which is extremely difficult to stop. I do see improvements in border policing. I know that there are a number of plans on the cards. But you have to understand the borders that we're talking about here are enormous. They're not just landward borders, not just borders coming into other parts of Africa. There are also maritime borders, and there are also aerial borders. And, for example, in the area of maritime borders, we're beginning to see people arriving in boats, not at the same level of the Mediterranean as we see from day to day, but people are coming by sea, they're coming by air, and they're coming by land. This is very difficult to deal with given the scale of the problem.
Another category of crime, Professor Frankel, is that of kidnapping. This has become very worrying in the country because of the number of these that we have seen. What's driving that?
Absolutely. Look, at the moment, we have approximately 2,000 kidnappings per month, which is 12,000 per year, which is the highest level in the history of South Africa. It's driven by a number of things. It's driven, in many cases, by extortion, and it's driven in other cases by human trafficking. Those are the two main reasons. There are minor reasons for kidnapping as well. But the majority of people who are kidnapped are either kidnapped in order to extract rewards and bribes, and a great proportion of these are also people who are trafficked, particularly children. So those are the two factors there.
There are those, Professor Frankel, who say that South Africa's global crime ranking is, quote-unquote, a wake-up call. Just how prepared are our authorities to tackle this? Are they sophisticated? You're already laughing it off.
I'm laughing because, look, you've got to be a little bit skeptical about indexes. You know, you have a transparency index, you have a human trafficking index, you have a global crime index, and the figures are, in the end, I wouldn't say consciously manipulated, but you've got to be very careful with these figures. In South Africa, for example, sometimes a rape case is classified as a human trafficking case, which might be classified as a gender-based violence case, and so forth and so on. So you've got to be a little bit skeptical here. We may be seventh, we may be ninth, we may be the 18th, I don't know. Having said that, however, the situation is very serious indeed. We do have very high levels of crime, although I'm very uncertain about putting figures to it and about establishing rankings like we do with the DRC and Nigeria. We may be higher, we may be lower. We just don't have enough information. As far as the ability of the criminal justice system to handle it, we are not well equipped. As I already said, we have excellent laws. In the field of human trafficking, for example, we have a Prevention of Trafficking Act, but the things just don't get implemented. Many police lack the training, particularly at station level, and complicity with criminals, corruption in the criminal justice system, not only on the part of police, but on the part of magistrates, on the part of other senior members of the criminal justice system, is also highly prevalent. So dealing with crime effectively in this country means, in that sense, dealing with problems of corruption. And we know very well how difficult it is to deal with problems of corruption simply by looking at, let's call it political corruption. So there are a lot of very big challenges ahead here, and I don't think this is a problem which is going to be resolved very easily, if at all, in the foreseeable future.
Professor Philip Frankel, let me thank you very much for your time, author of a book on human trafficking in South Africa. So the situation is just not improving. In fact, if anything, it seems to be getting worse.